Good morning. My name is Tracy Kendrick, and for my public health issue and video project, I have chosen Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive degenerative disorder that attacks the nerve cells in the brain, resulting in loss of memory, loss of thinking and language skills, and the inability to live independently. This definition is provided by the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. So what causes Alzheimer's disease? The exact cause is unknown, but there are some factors that may play into your greater risk or increased chance of getting Alzheimer's as you age. Scientists believe there is a genetic component, the APOE, E4 form of a certain gene, or family history associated with Alzheimer's disease. There are also age-related changes in the brain that scientists think may be partially responsible for Alzheimer's, as well as environmental and lifestyle factors. This is where I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story as far as Alzheimer's goes. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents, or grandmothers actually, succumbed to complications from Alzheimer's disease. My paternal grandmother, on her side of the family, for 4 generations back, we can trace Alzheimer's in the females. As far as my maternal grandmother, she was the 2nd generation to have Alzheimer's disease, and hers progressed much later in life, I would say around 80 years old. So who is most affected by Alzheimer's disease? We know that women are 2/3 more likely to be diagnosed with men. That's right, women, 2/3 more likely than men to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. As I previously mentioned, people with a family history are at greater risk of developing this disease, and people with Down syndrome are more susceptible to the early onset of Alzheimer's. Again, I have a nephew who has Down syndrome. So not only do we have the genetic component in our family of grandmothers with Alzheimer's disease, we also have my nephew who has Down syndrome. So we're really thinking that he may have a greater risk or increased chance of developing Alzheimer's disease. But thankfully, recently, however, in regard to Down syndrome research, the National Institute on Aging has launched a groundbreaking initiative to track the development and progression of Alzheimer's in people with Down syndrome. Partnered with the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, these two agencies, both of these agencies are part of the National Institute of Health, will look at specific biomarkers in Down patients that lead to early onset dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Which is fantastic news for my family anyway. So what might be some of the determinants of health associated with Alzheimer's? Health and factors may include heart disease, stroke, hypertension, diabetes, or obesity. Lifestyle factors could include living alone, poor socioeconomic status, the inability to afford health coverage. We've already kind of talked about biology and genetics and the risk for development of Alzheimer's disease, but let's talk about some factors as far as living alone. You know, if you live on your own, your disease could go unnoticed because no one is there to track the changes in your mental status. Also, if you're poor or can't afford health coverage, or maybe don't qualify for Medicare as you get older, you don't have access to health services that would give you an early diagnosis, which is really key in treating Alzheimer's disease. So, how prevalent is this disease in the United States of America? Currently, an estimated 5.4 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. Every 66 seconds, someone in the U.S. is newly diagnosed. And Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States of America. I mean, those amounts to me are just staggering. So with that many people living with Alzheimer's disease, you would think there would be a significant impact on our economy. In fact, you would be right. In 2015, family members and other unpaid caregivers provided $18.1 billion of care to patients. So that was unpaid care. If you tracked a dollar amount for those caregivers and family members that were taking care of these patients, this is what the dollar amount would include. $236 billion was spent in 2016 for Alzheimer's health care, including hospital stays, hospice care, long-term care in a facility, and in 2017 we saw an increase. In 2017, $259 billion was spent, making Alzheimer's the most expensive disease in the United States. That statistic alone really surprised me. I would have thought maybe cancer or different types of cancer would have been the most expensive, but no, it's Alzheimer's disease. So what is the political impact for Alzheimer's disease? Well, there's all sorts of things to discuss here, such as rising costs in health insurance premiums, who's covered, all of the baby boomer age. They're becoming at this age where Alzheimer's will become more prevalent in their lives, which means the cost of health care again will increase. So politically, here is some recent news that was just amazing. On May 5th, 2017, in the United States, this is recently, a $400 million increase on Alzheimer's research was signed into law thanks to the hard work of advocacy groups steered by the Alzheimer's Association and AIM, which is the Alzheimer's Impact Movement. The National Institute of Health will receive this funding approved by federal leaders, which will further research Alzheimer's disease. We can't really discuss Alzheimer's disease without talking about some ethical issues associated with this disease. So here's the slide in its form. Let's talk about this a little bit. Dementia-related behaviors are some ethical issues because when you have Alzheimer's disease, there are changes in your brain that sometimes leads to psychotic or childlike behavior. So regulated medicine for the mind and the changing Alzheimer's brain is sometimes hard to sort out. Diagnosis disclosure. You're discussing the disease with the patient, so it is the job of the healthcare providers to make sure they have the most beneficial information to the patient and also to caregivers. Another ethical issue, driving. When do you take the keys from a family member with Alzheimer's disease? Or, it may be your neighbor. You notice that they may be driving differently. How do you approach that? What ethically is the right thing to do? Electronic tracking. I don't know if you've been into any nursing home or rehab centers lately, but they typically have what they call as their lockdown unit, which is where the Alzheimer's patients are usually located because of their wandering. Some of them may have monitors on, similar to an ankle monitor, to track their whereabouts. Feeding issues. I learned from experience when I was taking care of my grandmother, feeding. There are some ethical issues with feeding. For example, the body, as it ages and declines and gets nearer death, will start shutting down on its own. So a lot of your Alzheimer's patients, as in my grandmother's case, she started closing her mouth and wouldn't eat. So do you put the feeding tube in or not? We did not. That was what she wanted before power of attorney was given to my uncles. So she didn't want that prolonged life effort. End-of-life care, the DNR, or the right to die, the do not resuscitate orders. Very important before the Alzheimer's brain changes to get this while patients are still in their right mind, so to speak. Right to treatment, right to be covered, right to not be denied covered. These are all ethical issues. And finally, the right to autonomy, as we discussed in our public health class. Autonomy is the right to self-govern or have a say in your own health care. So maybe they make decisions, as my grandmother did, as in her case, before she got so bad. So what is the future of Alzheimer's disease? This is my opinion of Alzheimer's disease. It takes away your dignity, your strength, your memory, your physical capability, and last but not least, it steals your identity. My wish would be that no person ever lose their ability to remember their own name, recognize family members, or take care of their most basic needs. Alzheimer's disease may have won the battle for many, but it is my belief that with research, donations, and advocacy, we will win the war. I wanted to personally thank the federal government for continuing Alzheimer's research that had remained stagnant for many years. But now with this big increase, I have lots of hope for the future. Thank you.